Thanks for joining us.
Talkline Network Radio, America's longest-running Jewish broadcast network, the voice of the Jewish community.
Welcome to the podcast. You are now tuned in to this episode of our podcast. Today, we are going to interview some of the greatest and most influential minds in our field. And now, please welcome your host.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
Welcome back to the program. I'm Zev Brenner. It's been a while since we last had Rabbi Dov Fischer. He's a prolific writer. He's a speaker. He's sought after. He is currently the Rabbi Young Israel of Orange County. He's also National Vice President, Coalition for Jewish Values. He's a senior editor at the American Spectator and retired after 20 years as a law professor. And just giving you some background of what he does, and he's not afraid to speak out. Former national director also of the Jewish Defense League. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's a delight to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Before I get to you talk about what Israel and what's happening here in the anti-Semitism, I do want to share with our audience, perhaps you would share, you've gone through a whole life-changing experience, a lung transplant. So you've been through quite a bit the last couple of years.
Sure. I don't want to take much of your listeners' time on it, but I actually have been able to use my experience having had a lung transplant to help some people in terms of my pastoral counseling, even in that regard. Back in 2014, I started finding myself shorter in breath, and little by little, it got more and more of a concern. I saw a pulmonologist, a lung doctor, and they found that I had something called interstitial lung disease, and it means that your alveoli take less and less oxygen as you breathe. And soon enough, I was on one of those Inogen portable oxygen concentrators with cannula in my nose, making me look like an old man. And it kept getting worse and worse. Finally, my wife said to me, she thinks I might need a lung transplant. And I said, I don't want one of those. I was a stubborn husband and said, no, I don't want one. And she said, well, I'm just going to schedule you for a general evaluation at Cedars-Sinai Hospital, which in Los Angeles is like Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. And she dragged me kicking and screaming. I agreed to go through a day of an evaluation, kept saying, I don't need a lung transplant. I don't need one. They put me through CT scans, MRIs, X-rays. At the end of the day, they sat down with me and I said, so everything okay? I mean, I know I'm not doing well, but can I go home? And they said, you can go home, but be aware, we just evaluated, our team of 6 doctors evaluated your day of diagnostic exams, and you can go home, but be aware you're not going to be going anywhere tomorrow because you're going to die in your sleep tonight.
Wow.
So that was a very persuasive recruitment. To the degree that they recruit patients for their program, it was an extremely persuasive recruitment tactic. I immediately admitted myself into the hospital, and 2 months later, they had put a new lung in me. And Baruch Hashem, by God's miracles, here I am right now, 18 months later. They did paralyze one of my 2 vocal cords during the procedure, and I had to take a particular antibiotic that left me half deaf. But with additional God-blessed miracles like a particular medical intervention for my vocal cord and hearing aids, I'm dangerous again. It bothers me. I don't want to just be healthy. That's not how Dov Fischer operates. If I'm not dangerous, it doesn't pay to be alive. So when they saw me walking and I was in rehab and they said, you look good, I said, I'm not good enough yet. If I can't beat up a Nazi in the street, I'm not rehabbed yet. I want to be able to beat someone up. And they said, okay, we'll keep working at it. And they finally gave me the second cert, just like you get a bachelor's degree and then you get a graduate degree. I not only was certified rehab, but I'm certified to beat up Nazis. Now
You have beaten up lately.
I mean, when you know you can beat up a Nazi, you walk in the street a certain way, and Nazis don't bother you. They can smell a Jew. They can smell a Jewish student at Columbia who's going to start crying as soon as someone says "Free Palestine." and they can smell another kind of Jew who, if they say free Palestine, will punch them in the face. And they just don't say free Palestine to that kind of Jew. They wait for the one that cries.
You know, I had on Professor Shaul Magid the other night, and we got into an argument. And according to him, the Nazis are not amolik, Hamas is not amolik, Hitler is not amolik. So a very extreme position, because these are people who want to kill Jews, and we have to defend ourselves from them. Not saying we should go about killing them, but just interesting to hear this prestigious left-wing professor who just would not refuse to classify them as amolik.
Well, I'll tell you, it's kind of tricky, because if we're going to talk halacha to a rabbi, I mean, the Arabs, to the degree that they descend from Yishmael, Amalek is a descendant of Esav. So it could be that Hitler and the Nazis are Amalek. I can't say that the Arabs are Amalek. I just can't.
Well, Rav Soloveitch, if I'm not mistaken, you have a physical Amalek and a spiritual Amalek. Somebody who kills Jews the way Hamas does may not be a. First of all, Sancheiriv mixed up the whole world. That's number one. So in which case, it's possible that you can have a Yishmaelite that comes from Esav and is Amalek. But even that notwithstanding, you have a situation where there can be a spiritual Amalek, and you look now at the end of days, and we see even Amalek. You're seeing the Esav, and you see Yishmael. And Yishmael is the ones that are killing the Jews the most today. At least been for the last decades. The Esavs have not really been as active as the Yishmaelim, the Muslim extremists that want to kill Jews.
It's an interesting discussion if we go the halacha route. And for me, what do I care if they're Amalek? Kill them anyway. If they're anti-Semites, attack them anyway. If who cares what they are? If they threaten Jews, the halacha, the Rambam, I mean, everybody, the Gemara, you kill them. You break Shabbat. You go on Shabbos and you kill them. It's not even called breaking Shabbos. We learned from David HaMelech in his fight. He when all they have to do is set fire to the local neighborhoods. They don't even have to kill Jews. All they have to do is set fire to Jewish property and Jewish farms if they live on the borders of Israel, and you go and kill them on Shabbos. So that's all right.
I don't think we possibly go with Jewish law today, even though the Torah gives you a commandment to kill, to destroy the people from Amalek. We don't really do that today.
No, we don't. But if they attack Israel, go for it. Go for it. You don't need them to be Amalek. They for all I care, they could be Dodgers fans. You can kill them if they try to kill Jews. Anyone who tries to kill Jews. And by the way, just before we get into subjects you might want to go on to, I've been bursting to have an opportunity to talk on the East Coast to someone like you, who has such a wonderful reach and audience throughout the United States, and certainly throughout the New York area. I am furious as a graduate of Columbia University. That's my alma mater. When I went to Columbia University, if anyone started up with Jews or Israel, we beat them up on campus with our Columbia University pedigree. We beat them up. We didn't cry. We didn't ask for the Anti-Defamation League. The problem in my mind, which is counter everybody I know, my mind is that we have so incorporated and internalized a liberal mindset and a woke mindset of victimology. We have raised an America on victimology, a whole generation of Jews and non-Jews on victimology, where everyone is a victim. I'm black, I'm a victim. I'm a woman, I'm a victim. I'm gay, I'm a victim. I'm Muslim, I'm a victim. Everybody's a victim. And Jews have been raised on that with this Holocaust education, which I've been writing for 20 years. You can just Google me. I had an article in Newsweek magazine on it. I've written on it extensively in the American Spectator and elsewhere. I'm against Holocaust education. I've always been against it. It makes Jews look like victims. And
no, but not enough Jews know about the Holocaust, including religious circles. So it's known that Jews know about the Holocaust. They don't.
We have internalized so much. Well, out here on the West Coast, they don't even emphasize teaching it to Jews. They emphasize teaching non-Jews and bringing them to the Holocaust Museum on the West Coast, the Simon Wiesenthal Museum of Tolerance. And there's so much emphasis on Jewish victims that when Jews are suddenly in students at Columbia University and Arabs and anti-Semites get up and start yelling, "From the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free," instead of going ahead and pulling out 100 and 1,000 Jews to counter protest with big signs saying, "From the river to the sea, Yisrael is free," instead of doing that, they start screaming and crying. Oh no, they're yelling. They want to eradicate Israel. So let them want to eradicate Israel. You stand out 1,000 Jewish students that you want to eradicate Gaza. I mean, why are we asking the ADL to somehow put an end to those rallies? Yes, and if an individual Jew is in danger, that's 2 or 3 people threatening them. Jews should know how to beat them up.
But,
And
but listen, you grew up and you were national director of Jewish Defense League, where you had the highest squad, where they went around and fought anti-Semites. Today, I don't think the police would allow it. It's a different time and age.
I do think the Jews who get attacked should fight back. And I think that there's now a default to turn to the ADL and to cry. There's anti-Semitism. Now, don't get me wrong. Go ahead and cry about anti-Semitism. Don't cry. But go ahead and demand that anti-Semites be taken out of their positions, such as Claudine Gay at Harvard and this Liz McGill at University of Penn, who is out now. Go ahead and demand that they be thrown out. But at the same time, fight them, fight back. Don't rely on people to others to do your fighting for you.
As you were speaking, there's a book that came out recently. We did an interview with the author of the book. During the 1940s, you had these Nazi gangs in Yorkville, New York, and elsewhere that were hostile and beating up Jews. So there was a judge, his name escapes me. He contacted Mayor Lansky and the Jewish mafia, and he said to them, "Break bones, but don't go too far, but just fight them." And you know what they did? They went after them, and some of these demonstrations stopped. But that was the 1940s, and you can do it today. I don't think you can get away with that. That was a different time, a different era.
If we did it, we would get away with it. We would change the time. We would, especially in New York, we would change the time. We would change the era. Jews would get away with it.
Are you calling again for Jewish Defense League to be resuscitated?
There aren't the right Jews, and let me put it this way: yes, the American Jewish community was better off when there was a Jewish Defense League that was active. I'm not saying right now there's no need to be shooting into Russian buildings and bombing Russian buildings, because Russian Jews can leave. But the idea of having strong Jews on the streets beating up anti-Semites, all Jews benefited from a time, and they would benefit again if there were such an organization. Yes, indeed.
Do you know a lot of Hasidic Jews are getting gun permits right now, training? There's been an uptick in those in our community who are getting weapons training and getting weapon licenses because of anti-Semitism.
That's a good thing.
Our guest on the West Coast is Rabbi Dov Fischer, the Rabbi of Young Israel of Orange County. He is also a national vice president of the Coalition for Jewish Values. He's a senior editor at the American Spectator, former national director of the Jewish Defense League, a prolific writer and author. What's the anti-Semitism like on the West Coast in Los Angeles? In New York, it's pretty bad. What's it like in LA?
It's going to be, and it is worse than New York in many ways, because in New York, you have a larger concentration of Jews. And in Los Angeles, the fewer the Jews, the more tempting a target they are to anti-Semites. There have been several incidents out here on the West Coast. One situation where there was a drive-by shooting at a kosher restaurant, no one was hurt. There was a Shabbat when about 8 kosher restaurants all were vandalized. There haven't been any kind of campus things at UCLA, USC, and the other local colleges. There are the usual anti-Israel protests, but nothing as exciting as on the East Coast. There was an incident out in the San Fernando Valley and in the area of Thousand Oaks. There was a demonstration of local anti-Israel and then counter-protest, pro-Israel, and a 65-year-old Jewish guy got into it with an Arab, and the Arab gave him a punch, knocked him over backwards, and his head hit the sidewalk, and he died of a subdural hematoma. So there's actually, to that degree, been a killing. It was probably an accidental kill. It was a deliberate punch in the face, but it wasn't aimed at killing him. And then it turned out that the Arab who punched him is a professor, which brought to mind the Chafetz Chaim in Sefer Bereshis, where he talks about the prophecy to Hagar that you'll have a son who's going to be a para Adam, a wild ass, and in the animal sense of a wild ass. And the Chafetz Chaim comments that it's a prophecy, that's what's, even if they're doctors and lawyers, para Adam is para Adam. So here is a professor who punched a guy and killed him. There have been a few cases like that. A Jew just got beaten up in Beverly Hills. So you have some active anti-Semitism. Basically, when Jews appear to be weak, the anti-Semites come out. And when Israel is at war, the anti-Semites come out. Next thing you know, Greta Thunberg, the little snot out of Sweden, suddenly she joins the anti-Semites. Like all of a sudden, there can't be, there has to be climate justice. Suddenly, we're no longer talking about global warming and climate change, but climate justice. And who's going to be climate justice? Hamas, which basically has polluted the entire Gaza. They never created a water system there, and they basically pollute Gaza, and they create bomb factories. And by contrast, Israel is a world leader on climate technology. And the next thing you know, you have some little snot out of Sweden, Greta Thunberg, against Israel. So when Israel's at war, when Jews seem to be weak, it brings back the little thing in Sefer in the Bamidbar around Perek Tet Vav, the story of the Meraglim, the spies, and then they come back and they say, we went to the land and it's a good land and the food is good, but we recommend that you not try to go into the land. Maybe we should go back to Egypt because we saw the locals in the land, and if we're going to have to go to war against them, they're giants and we're grasshoppers. And the famous Rashi, where Rashi says the reason that they thought that the giants saw them as grasshoppers is they saw themselves as grasshoppers. If they had seen themselves as giants, then their enemies would have seen them as giants. And we end up seeing later on in the book of Joshua, Sefer Yoshua, we go into the land, and it turns out, no, they did not see us as grasshoppers, but Rachav tells the two advanced men for Yehoshua, Joshua, that actually everybody here is terrified of you people. So if Jews see themselves as strong, there's less anti-Semitism. When Jews project weakness, there's more anti-Semitism. So we have it on the West Coast too.
You know, in New York, they're actually protesting even at the Holocaust Memorial. This is not a war against Israel, it's a war against the Jews. And people talk about Palestine and Palestinian rights, et cetera, but this is a war against the Jews. In fact, the slogan, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which means that they don't want a Jewish state. But if you're fighting for Gaza, they should be singing Gaza, free Gaza. They're not singing free Gaza, singing free Palestine. They want all of it. And this is the problem. The media doesn't pick up on these factors. And listen, we had a big demonstration in Washington, D.C., 300,000 strong, and sent a message. But these Hamas rallies are almost daily in New York and other parts of the country. They get hundreds of people. They shut down buildings. They try to shut down Christmas trees. They're looking to make as much trouble as they can, and they get away with it. That's the problem. They get away with it. The police are afraid. By the way, I have to do more research on this. I heard of a situation where a Jewish person was standing someplace and the police want him to move, not the protesters. Why should the Jew move when it's the protesters that are hindering him? But that's the way they are. They're afraid to start up with these protesters.
You're absolutely right. And we see it as a symbol and a reflection that it's anti-Semitic, not just about Israel. In fact, often not even at all about Israel. the way that they go after a hummus store, an Israeli-owned hummus store in Philadelphia, or a Jewish Israeli-owned coffee shop out in Queens. So what does a coffee shop or a hummus store have to do with Israel? It's anti-Semitic, pure and simple. The idea that they go after different Jewish things. There was that situation at a cafe, a coffee store in Oakland, where they wouldn't serve the lady, and the lady goes into the bathroom and complains that there's anti-Semitic graffiti in the bathroom, and next thing you know, the two baristas are throwing the Israeli out of the store. And Baruch Hashem, the owner saw it and ended up firing those two people. But it's anti-Semitic. It's not just anti-Israel. And as you say, when they say from the river, the good news in a way, if you want to find a silver lining, is that the average moron who chants from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, has no idea what river they're talking about, what sea they're talking about, and has no idea even where Palestine, so to speak, is on the map. It's just they go and they join because that's the thing to do now. And that's what their professors tell them. Their professors give them a reading. Oh, God, look, I went to college. I went to Columbia. So I take courses in poli-sci because at the time I thought I would go on to be a lawyer. As it turned out,
You did become a lawyer, right?
yeah, I went first to Reitz, got smicha at Reitz, was a Rav 10 years, and then went to UCLA Law School and I became an attorney. But at the time I went to college with the intention of going straight to law school. I was pre-law, so I took poli-sci, political science. So I would get reading lists. You have to read books for the class. And every reading list, looking back, was a left-wing reading list. I remember once I went to a doctor as some kind of a sinus issue as a college junior. And the doctor was a little bit right-wing of center, and he's talking to me. So tell me about yourself while I'm looking at you. Where do you go to school? I go to Columbia. Oh, really? What are you majoring in? Political science. Have you ever heard of Ayn Rand? I said, no. He said, you're a junior. What do you said you're majoring in political science? Yeah. You've never heard of Ayn Rand in all your reading lists? They never had you read The Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged? I said, no, I haven't heard of those. So what do you read? I started telling him, well, I've heard Franz Fanon, The Wretched of the Earth. There was some, I read every term, no matter what the course is. There's the Marx Engels reader. It could be political science in America. It could be the history of New York. It could be France, whatever it is, Karl Marx reader. But you never. So what happens is these kids go to college. They get themselves anti-Zionist professors, 3/4 of whom are Jews, by the way, self-hating Jewish professors, including professors in the Jewish studies departments. They're usually the worst.
Well, Alan Durkin wants us to close down all the Jewish studies departments on campus.
Good for him. He's absolutely right. 90% of the professors in the Jewish studies departments around the United States are self-haters. Here in the West Coast at UCLA, there's a guy named David Myers. He's the big head of the Jewish Studies Department, UCLA. And by my standards, he's an apostate. Absolutely. And he's involved in all J Street and to the left of J Street. And they're all like that. And then they give reading lists. And what reading lists do they give? Do you think they're giving them reading lists jam-packed with Jabotinsky and Menachem Begin? They're giving them reading lists. At most, maybe there's 10 things on the left, one thing on the right, just so that it's like a nice token little thing that they could beat up on. But what ends up happening then is a college kid has taken 4 years of college, read tons of garbage, read almost nothing on the other side, been indoctrinated not only on the Israel issue, but on every issue to the left. And then it's not surprising that they find people yelling from the river to this. So then they ask them, where do you stand? Well, if I say from the river to the sea, I get some really hot chicks. And we have part of that great hookup culture in the dorms. And if I say I'm pro-Zionist, none of the chicks are going to want to be with me. And they're not even going to let me be in the dorms. No one's going to talk to me. I'm not going to have any friends. I'm not going to get invited to parties. I won't be allowed in fraternity or sorority. So that's what happens in college. I've been there.
By the way, Alan Dor said this 4 years ago to me on the air, maybe 5 years ago, that some Jewish students said they're afraid to say the pro-Israel. They can't get a date if they said the pro-Israel. It's about 4 or 5 years ago. And here's something interesting. What you said, you picked up something. We had a professor from California, one of the universities. I forgot the college. They did a survey of, you're right, the people who were singing from a river to the sea have no idea what river, what sea. Some of them even thought Yasser Arafat was the first president of Israel. That's how ignorant that they are. But here's the danger of what's happening to college campuses. I don't know if you're aware of this. The evangelical Christians are the best friends Israel has in America, correct?
Correct.
But the younger generations of evangelical Christians are pro-Palestinian. And I asked one of the pastors, what's the reason why? You know what one of the reasons why is? A lot of these Christians go to these woke colleges and they get warped in these colleges and they come out hating Israel. That's the danger. Not only for Jews, it's the Christians and Americans.
Yes, it is a problem, and I don't know what the I don't know what the world is going to be like in 30 or 40 years. And all I know is this: Israel is eternal. Rav Herzog, Chief Rabbi Herzog, the second chief rabbi after Rav Kook. So it was the 1940s, and Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, was advancing into Alamein in Egypt, and his target was to eventually make it into Palestine, namely pre-state Israel. And people went to Chief Rav Herzog and they said, you know, if Rommel comes in here with his Nazis, you are going to get torn to shreds. They're going to torture you. They're going to say, who's the chief rabbi here? We recommend you leave and go to America just till this war is over. And he said, I'm not leaving, because the Tanakh, the Bible says, it speaks of 2 destructions, 2 churbans. It does not speak of a third churban. Israel is not going down a third time. And he felt that strongly about it that he wouldn't leave. Of course, Rommel never made it to Palestine. Israel's Lenetzach, it's forever. And I don't know what will be in 30 years. There are many possibilities. For all I know, in 30 years, Russia may end up being Israel's ally and best friend. If America turns on Israel, then maybe Russia, maybe China. Who is to know? 40 years ago, who could have expected what exists today? I mean, in 1950s, everyone thought France, de Gaulle, Baruch Hashem, we have de Gaulle. Baruch Hashem, we have France.
And Russia was a big supporter of Israel in the early days. It shifted. America wasn't as big a supporter in 1948, 1949, the early days of this state.
Exactly. Number one, Eisenhower was a little bit of an enemy, and de Gaulle was the friend. And if someone would have told you in 1956, believe it or not, in 10 years, France will stab us in the back. Well, what are we going to do? What do you worry about? America will be there. America? America's not there. Well, guess what? America. So who knows what will be in 30, 40 years?
As we close out, President Eisenhower forced Israel to leave the Sinai in 1956, and he threatened the UJA and all these Jewish groups who would take away their nonprofit status if they didn't support him. At the end of his life, he said he made a mistake, but the damage was done. The damage was done.
In fact, frankly, a lot of people talk about Harry Truman as a great tzaddik. Harry Truman was not, people don't connect 2 dots. The 2 dots are Truman voted for Israel in the UN, and the other dot is that Jews used to run weapons illegally through the ports of New York and New Jersey to Israel. And kids used to work with the mafia, the Italian mafia, to sneak and run guns to Israel. So the question is, why are Jews running guns to Israel out of America if the United States under Truman is busy supporting Israel? Because the answer is that he put a complete embargo on weapons to Israel. So the fact is that America has not always been such a wonderful thing. And if, God forbid, the young evangelicals turn on the Jews, and if the Jews don't turn 100% behind Israel, it'll come from our survival. It's the old thing in Perek Dalet of Sefer Megillas Esther, that if you, Esther, don't stick out your neck right now to help the Jews, so Revach v'Hatzalah, survival will come from another source, and you and your family will go under. We, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God Almighty, has many, many ways to help preserve the state of Israel. And who could have dreamt then that Israel today would have like an army? Like, imagine what it must have felt like just a few years ago. I lived, it's nothing to imagine. We were all worried. They had all these rockets. Who imagined there would be an Iron Dome? And then
If I 30 seconds left, did you ever imagine that Joe Biden would be such a defender of Israel?
Exactly.
Who would have thought? He did a great job defending Israel against all the pressure that he's getting from all over the world, including United States allies. So,
all the more so since everybody is saying, and there's some truth to it, that he's not on his A game anymore in his life, and he's doddering, but there's a certain strength he has. Me personally, I'm voting for the Republican next year, whoever it is, but I will give Biden, of all the Democrats out there, there's Biden, there's Richie Torres, the congressman, and you know who else there is? If you're looking, because unfortunately, the amount of Democrats you can count them on one hand, unfortunately. But you know who really also is a surprise? This guy, John Fetterman. I give the devil his due. Maybe the guy doesn't know how to put on a pair of pants and he only wears shorts and an undershirt. But give the man his due. He's a strong supporter. He's got pictures of all the hostages in his office. Give him his due.
Okay, so, Hillary Clinton has surprised us too. Hillary Clinton has been a strong supporter.
Unbelievable. She was worse always. And suddenly she's been a very strong supporter of Israel. So you never know.
There's a God in this world.
What's that?
There's a God in this world.
Right. That's proof.
And he has a sense of humor.
When people come and say, Rabbi, I don't believe in God, how do you explain Hillary Clinton being pro-Israel?
I know somebody who gave up being an atheist, not enough holidays. Anyway, Rabbi Dov Fischer, I want to thank you for being with us, the spiritual leader in Israel of Orange County, national director. He's actual vice president of Coalition for Jewish Values, senior contributing editor at American Spectator, former national director, Jewish Defense League. Thank you for joining us. We've got to have you back again. So thank you. The time went by very quickly.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for tuning in to
Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast, the pulse beat of the Jewish community.
For continuous Jewish programs, TalklineNetwork.com, or our 24-hour-a-day listen line at 641-741-0389. For past shows, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Instagram, and all major podcast platforms, or jewishpodcast.org. Thanks for listening to the TalklineNetwork.com.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.